Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me back there. Thanks a lot for coming, and thanks a lot to Kara and HYUNOOK for organizing this, and my co-panelist, Cramer. I am not sure if my talk is positive or negative. I just try to be dispassionate to look at this issue, because there's a lot of noises around it, and just try to, kind of analyze the issue calmly to see, what's out there, and what are the options for the U.S., for example. So let me just start by playing this clip about an interview of President Trump.
Right now, China's leader, Xi Jinping, and President Trump spoke by phone yesterday. The president told me I have a call scheduled at 10 o'clock tonight. They had a call about the escalating tensions with North Korea. Here's what the president told me about dealing with the nuclear threat from the north. You redirected Navy ships to go toward the Korean Peninsula. What are we doing right now in terms of North Korea?
You never know, do you? You never know.
That's how we
There's a lot of talk about the military.
Yeah.
I'm not like Obama, where they talk about in 4 months we're going to hit Mosul. And in the meantime, they get ready, and like so look, they're still fighting. Mosul was supposed to last for a week, and now they've been fighting it for many months, and so many more people died. I don't want to talk about it. We are sending an armada, very powerful. We have submarines, very powerful, far more powerful than the aircraft carrier, that I can tell you. And we have the best military people on earth. And I will say this, he is doing the wrong thing.
Do you think he's mentally fit?
I don't know. I don't know him, but he's doing the wrong thing.
All right, that's what President Trump said during an interview very recently, and you could hear him, right? He's he's trying to show that we are strong, we can deal with the threat. We're gonna send in an armada to deal with that. But it turned out that the armada was going somewhere else, to Australia. But then he just kind of, misspoke or given the wrong information, and so it turned out that it was not real. But then that really raised the tension about North Korea, as like the North Korean government just before that was announcing that they plan to conduct a new missile test. So that really raised the tension in the area about about the possibility of a confrontation between the U.S. and North Korea. But then just like a week or 2 weeks ago, President Trump said that he wanted to meet. He would be happy to meet with Chairman Kim Jong Il of North Korea under the right circumstances. So he kind of changed his tone just like 2 weeks ago to be more conciliatory to North Korea. So so what's here for the U.S. and how do we understand North Korea? Because North Korea seemed to be also kind of the cause of all of this U.S. reactions. So so my talk will be mostly about North Korea, and also I try to contrast North Korea to the U.S. to see what are their preferences, policy preferences, and what are our own preferences, and how can we adopt a right policy in this conflict. So so what do North Korea want? What do they fear? Do they fear U.S. invasion, like most people think? Do they fear an impending collapse? Do they really face an impending collapse? And I must admit that I'm not a North Korean specialist. I study politics in East Asia, But then, North Korea is quite a difficult country to do research on, and there are very actually few experts on North Korea. But I do study, the politics of communist and revolutionary states, and that also, helped me really understand North Korea a little bit, together with my understanding of East Asian politics. So I want to go back to the post-Cold War, the immediate, period right after immediately after the Cold War, to understand North Korea, because you have to go back that far to really understand the political, social, economic trends in North Korea, to understand their policy. So a main event that occurred at the end of the Cold War was, certainly the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc, and China adopting market reform. So that was a huge shock for all of those, communist countries, especially small ones, that depended on the Soviet bloc, the Soviet Union, and China for support, for aid, for investment, for trade, for technology, for defense, even for legitimacy, because they claim themselves to be the government of the future, of communism. And now, with the collapse of world communism, all of them were in deep trouble. So that was a huge event that really affected the thinking of North Korean leaders. And the second event was the rise of their main rival. The arch rival of North Korea was obviously South Korea. And as you could see here, an image of the South Korean president, Roh Tae-woo, visiting the Soviet Union before it collapsed in 1991. So even before the collapse of the Soviet bloc, South Korea already taking the initiative to establish contacts and diplomacy and relationship with the big communist powers, from the Soviet Union to China, and it was quite successful at that. And that really worried, concerned the North Korean leaders, because as their main rival gained in international legitimacy, they were gaining it at their expense, right? They were gaining it at their expense, and so that was another reason why the North Korean leaders became really agitated, became really worried, and then to add to the tragedy of the collapse of the communist bloc was the death of the founding father of North Korea, who was the great leader. That was his title, the great leader, Kim Il-sung, in 1994. And he founded North Korea since 1948, and he dominated the government, the regime. He became the father of North Korea, just like George Washington here, for nearly half a century. And now he died, he died. So that was another loss of an experienced leader at the helm for North Korea. And that kind of, created the concern for the young, inexperienced leadership that came to power. That's his son, and then later on, now we have his grandson taking over. And they're young, and his son was not that young, and he also had about a decade of experience in government, but he was not as, in the same league with his father, right? He was not at that level. So there was that issue. And then just right about the time that Kim Il-sung died, there was a big famine in North Korea that took place between 1994, 1995, up to 1998. So it was right at the time when the great leader died. Then came another tragedy, which was the famine that caused the death of about 1 million North Koreans out of starvation. The death of 1 million out of a population of about 25 million people. So it was a huge, tragedy. And then because of the failure of the state system, because of the original cause was the flood, right? The flood and the bad weather, but then the deep cause was the collectivized agricultural system that did not give incentives for farmers to work, and other issues that caused the famine. Then the famine was, during the famine, the state supply system that, that kind of provide rice, grains at affordable prices to everyone in the country, that system failed. It just didn't have rice to distribute to the people. So like, people who live far away from the main towns, people who were sick or who were older, who did not have access to any pieces of land to grow their own food, these people were the first to die. And the system just kind of disintegrated, the system of food supply disintegrated. And then so what happened is that the government gradually had to let people to find their own sources of food. So there were there were a lot of private illegal markets that emerged during the famine, during the crisis, and after that, that allow people to have, some people had a little bit more food than they could consume. They could, bring to the market and trade it for other things that they wanted. And so that market system just gradually and at first illegally emerged. And also there was a lot of people, traveling around the country despite the ban on travel. Like North Koreans were not free to travel, right? So they just travel because otherwise they would die, right? So they would travel around, and there were reports of children being seen begging for food and dying at the train stations in the country. So the issue, eventually the government had to let people travel, and eventually the government had to let people to conduct some, private trade. And a lot of people also went across the border into China to engage in trade with Chinese companies or Chinese individuals, as a way to find livelihood, to supply themselves with food and other goods. So as the market slowly and gradually emerged, the government was losing control over society, because like it used to be like if you were not loyal to the government, then they could just deny you food and you would die, right? But now people were not dependent, so dependent. Some people were still dependent on government stores to get their grains. But then many people now, they could try to find food from a non-government source, and they were no longer dependent on the government food supply anymore. And so there was a concern about losing control over society, over people, because they were not so dependent on the government anymore. So that was another factor that increased the paranoia among the government leaders about the loss of the power, the loss of the regime, the loss of their position. So the dear leader Kim Jong Il, that was also his official title, dear leader. He came to power, and I'll talk more about his policy in a minute. And then, he died recently, and then he was replaced by dear respected comrade Kim Jong Un, that's his official title. So my point is that they are still young and not so experienced, and they had to do something to beef up their credentials. They had to do something to really assert their leadership, and that's I think that contributed to their the kind of policy that we have seen. So North Korean policy, so under Kim Jong Il, who was the father of the current leader, he promoted this policy. He actually established this policy called military first, or Songun, right? Is that how you say it in Korean? To give priority of government budget, of government attention, of the resources available to the military to strengthen the capability of the North Korean military to cope with the outside threat. So military first has been the policy since around 1997, and it still continues. So the regime now emphasizes, the military, but not economic development. So they emphasize the military to protect the country, to give the country security that they think it needs. But then at the same time, they also try to rebalance the diplomatic relationship. So North Korea has been active in expanding diplomatic relationship with, with Western Europe, with other countries, besides, trying to increase, to strengthen the capacity of the military. And there has been, like Japanese Prime Minister Koizumi visited North Korea. Two South Korean leaders, presidents, visited Pyongyang, visited North Korea to have meeting with North Korean leaders. So North Korea has also broadened its diplomatic relationship besides, but then military first, military strengthening is the cornerstone of their policy for the last 20 years or so. And because of their paranoia, these leaders have tended to act up in case of any, small clashes with the, South Korean forces, or any small violations of the enemy, of their perceived territory. They tended to act up, meaning they would retaliate with more forces than necessary, just to show the enemy that they are still strong, they remain strong, and they don't have any weaknesses that the enemy can take advantage of. So the key of their if you look at all the small clashes, like the Cheonan ship event a few years ago, it was just they just try to show that they are still strong, they're not weak, despite the famine, despite the death of the great leader, despite the collapse of the Soviet bloc, despite all these changes, they remain strong, right? So that's tendency to act up that caused many analysts to think that they're crazy, they're mad, they are irrational. They are this and that, but then we have to understand their situation to understand the rationale of their policy, and they also try to talk up, not just acting up, but talking up, exaggerating the threat from outside, from the U.S., from South Korea, from Japan, to justify the regime, the existence of the regime, the importance of continuing the tradition of the great leader Kim Il-sung. So they really both acting up and talking up. So this is a propaganda poster, and you could see that South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. Portrayed as security threats to North Korea. And what are the preferences and attitude to risk of North Korea that really contrasts it with the U.S.? So the preferences, their preferences can be ranked as follow. Like they still want the country to be unified under their rule. They have not completely given that up yet, and given the chance, they would still want to do it. They would still want to have it happen, of course, under their rule, not like North Korea under South Korea, but South Korea under North Korea. So that remains, even though it's more and more distant today, it remains a rule, something that they still want to have. The second preference was regime preservation. They want to protect the regime. They want to still be in power. Very simple. And the third and the fourth one are social stability and economic self-sufficiency in the long term. They know that the economy is weak. They know that they're in terms of national income per capita, they're probably like very poor compared to South Korea, and in terms of the size of the economy as well. So they know that economically they're weak, they're much poorer than South Korea, but then they are so they want that to happen. They want economic self-sufficiency and stability and development in the long term. But then that's not as important for them as the other preferences, the other goals, which is regime preservation and unification. And they have a high tolerance of war risk. And this is based on my observation. And one argument, one explanation is that they just have very little to lose in the war compared to their enemies. With South Korea, very rich. The richer you are, the more fear you have about losing your stuff. That's just natural. So they have nothing to fear that they will lose. So that's one of the explanations for why they have such a high tolerance of risk. So they were willing to act up to show excessive force, even with in response to very small clashes, because they have very low, very high tolerance of war risk. They can take the risk. They're willing to take the risk of war. But then, I don't think they will start war unless attacked, because they know they're weaker. They know, behind South Korea there's the U.S. and unless they get support from China or Russia, they're not gonna take the move. They're not gonna make the move. And I was, I am teaching a course on War and Peace this term, and we talk about the Pacific War and the Korean War. And actually, Kim Il-sung, he went to Moscow 3 times asking Stalin for support for his invasion of South Korea back in July 1950. So he went to Moscow 3 times and asking. The first time, Stalin said no. The second time, no. The third time, Stalin said, yes, you can do it. We're going to support you. And he did it. And he launched invasion across the 30th parallel. So like my sense of history is that they're not gonna launch an attack. They're not gonna start a war unless they are attacked first. Even though they have a very high tolerance, compared to the U.S. or South Korea or even Japan, they have very high tolerance of risk. They're not ready to start the war yet. Now let's turn to the U.S. American policy, as we have seen in like the agreed framework back in 1994 under Bill Clinton. We have tried to use material rewards and sanctions to make North Korea change its policy of nuclear weapon development and missile development. So we have tried to use these, and maybe my colleague Professor Cramer will talk more about the history of the relationship between America and North Korea. And we have also tried to involve China and Russia. We think these are the big powers behind North Korea, and if we can somehow make them create pressure on North Korea, then hopefully North Korea will change. And so these are the 2 things that we have tried to do in the past, from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush to Barack Obama, and we have frequently thrown casual insults at the leaders of North Korea, just like what you've seen in the video clip, or when Bush put North Korea among the axis of evil back in 2002. So, like our leaders have frequently insulted North Korean leaders, but then, like the issue actually is of low priority to the US. So North Korea cannot be compared to Iraq or Afghanistan, which were the places where the US actually went in and tried to overthrow the governments there, but not North Korea. North Korea, we have, talked a lot, we have talked up just like them, but then we have not really tried very hard to make changes happen. What are our preferences? Our top preferences, for regime change, right? We want a new regime in North Korea that's more maybe democratic, maybe more friendly to the West and Japan, and maybe under South Korean leadership and so on. So that's our first preference. And our second preference is no nuclear threat from North Korea. And the third preference is no missiles. Missiles can be used to launch, must be used to launch nuclear weapons. And then the last one is the status quo. We don't want the status quo. We want it to change. But then that's not, that's our last one. But then we have a low tolerance of war risk in contrast with North Korea. And I think General Mattis, a few days ago, he went on record to say that, it would be foolish to try to let war happen because, like South Korea is right there, with Seoul, with millions of people and so much economic assets and, people there within the range of conventional weapons of North Korea. So if a war happened today, this whole, it's going to be terribly devastating. It's going to be terribly destructive. So we have no taste for war. And preemptive strikes is not really an option because, the risk of war is too high, even though, we can destroy a few North Korean cities, they would still have the ability to cross the 38th parallel and cause great damages to South Korea. So it's not really an option anymore, especially now that many people suspect that North Korea already possess a couple of, nuclear bombs, right? So it's not really an option anymore. So I don't think that we will start war. So there will not be war. We will not start war unless North Korea attack South Korea first. But that's also not going to happen. So despite all the talk, Trump talk and talks like that, I don't think it's going to happen. War's going to happen. So what should the U.S. do? So basically, I think we just need to move on. We just need to acknowledge that, accept that the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty has failed in this case. It has failed before, right? It has failed in the case of India, not in Pakistan, right? It may have failed in some other cases as well. It has been successful in most cases. It has failed in some cases, because of certain situations, circumstances that it has failed. So just accept that, it failed and just maybe just let North Korea do what they want to, because, we don't have that capacity to stop them from doing so. But the issue is, we are afraid of North Korea exporting the technology and the bomb to our enemies, right? Like Iran or some other countries that may not like the US. So that's our concern. So many scholars have argued that we should offer diplomatic normalization with North Korea so that, that can help reduce the sense of insecurity that the leaders have, the sense of paranoia that the leaders have, so that they can, become a normal country. They don't have to worry about US invasion anymore. So they don't try to develop nuclear weapons anymore. But I have studied like these revolutionary states, and I don't think that's sufficient to really persuade them by offering them a diplomatic relationship, because they will continue to do what they have been doing, at least for some time before they change their policy. So because these are quite radical governments, and that's the way that they tend to act in most cases. So so the problem with normalization is that we can reduce the leaders' insecurity over time, and they can help North Korea to develop its economy and maybe transform to a normal country and so on. But the problem with that is that we can't really monitor their exports and imports and so on. So in the short to medium term, it may be difficult for us to really because in the absence of sanctions, it would be very difficult for us to really monitor what they are doing, trading with other countries. So it's we may not be able to do that effectively. So that's kind of the dilemma that I think with the normalization policy. But otherwise, I would expect the same, what we are having now, the same situation that we are having now to continue, for a long time, until the U.S. finally acknowledge that North Korea has, nuclear weapons, and we stop our policy to try to stop them from doing so. Thank you very much.
So all I'm going to discuss, I'm going to build sort of on Tuong's talk. So I'm Jane Cramer, and I'm not a North Korea specialist either. I'm a security specialist, and I do U.S. foreign policy. So I have some interesting, different views, and this should make for a good conversation. So I've been studying, and what I research North Korea is sort of in line with Beyond War's work in terms of, I work on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and I thank them for working on this because there's very few groups left after the Cold War who work on this. And we need more because it is becoming a big problem again. We thought this problem was solved, and it should be solved. Nothing has really changed. This is weird, what's going on with North Korea, and I'm going to explain that weirdness to you, okay? It's unnecessary. Both sides don't really want war, as Tuong said. And it has been thought of by experts as the most stable border that is allegedly in conflict in history. I've seen experts talk on it saying, well, I'm so bored of it. It's just ridiculously stable. There's no reason for war here. So the chances of war should be close to zero, right? Really close to zero, like vanishingly close, like crazy, okay? So that's the good news. The crazy news is we have seen this kind of problem in history where miscalculation, that's what you're going to keep seeing in the news, miscalculation could happen, right? Where both sides might not want war, but one side thinks for some reason the other is going to go first, so they're better off going before the other, or they are better off, making a statement of some kind before they lose their ability to make a statement or whatever, right? So miscalculations are incredibly common, and even provoked miscalculations are common, right? So this is, and both sides, as Tuong alluded to, have political reasons to do domestic politics. That's what I specialize in, the domestic politics of war. I talk about diversionary war as a big part of a project I'm working on. So I'm going to show you, we went over this. Sometimes I start with this just in case there's people in the room who don't know the history, but Tuong pretty much covered it. Israel and South Korea we're one people. There's no ethnic problem here. There's no conflict. There's no Palestinian, Israeli, nothing that they should fight over. They were one people, politically divided after World War II. We had the Korean War, and it ended where it began with a division. So then we had these leaders. We went over that with Tuong. So what's at stake here today? So I just put a few things together. What we're talking about right now is, while Tuong said it was about the nuclear, making them denuclearize, I would offer that that's a piece of it, but not the central piece, okay? What we really claim to be upset with are all the missile tests, because they've gone nuclear. They went nuclear in 2006, right? And I will explain in a second, but why they went nuclear in 2006. They went nuclear in 2006 in reaction to 2003, the Iraq War, where we got rid of Saddam Hussein. This problem was once solved, and they weren't going nuclear. They signed the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They cheated. They're not at all, I'm not painting them as non-cheaters or not roguish, as we like to say, but we actually have wisely banned that term at different points in time. But they are paranoid. They are not crazy, but they are paranoid. Those are different. And they've cheated. Most experts say they've cheated for extortion purposes most of the time, where they wanted to be paid to quit cheating because they were so poor, they needed aid, right? That's not the whole story, but that's a big piece of it. So I'm just letting you know there's different things going on here. But currently, right now, we are upset with their missile testing, right? This is the claim, that we are afraid of their missiles. So what do they have here? They have all of their missiles, and their missile technology is based on old Soviet technology. They got Soviet Scud missiles, and they've built on that. Now, I just like to point out to students, they went nuclear before they could build a missile, because building nukes is easy, right? Building a bomb was done in 1945, right? That's 1945 technology. It's easy. That's what they have. They basically have very rudimentary skills. There's debate now about whether they are actually getting a hydrogen bomb, which is a megaton weapon. They could, as anybody could who put enough effort into it. The knowledge has been out there since the early 50s. It takes an effort, and that's not where they're focusing their effort right now. They are focusing their effort on missiles, and they could focus their effort even better. But what they're actually, most military experts would argue, is they're focusing on missiles they can make that they can sell, because this is their best export for currency. So this is a money problem, okay? And they would like and have sold missiles and traded missiles for nuclear plans with Pakistan. A.Q. Khan, right, was in on this. This is, I don't know if you know this story at all, but A.Q. Khan is the Pakistani nuclear scientist who made it an industry to sell the bomb all over the globe. And that's what made many people in the US serious about disarmament under George Bush Jr. in the 2000s. Anyway, but what North Korea specializes in and has traded for many things, and especially currency, is missile technology. Now their missiles stink, right, relative to US missiles, but we will only sell them to our friends, okay? So we just made a $2 billion deal with the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. We just made another billions and billions deal, futuristic, not clear yet, with Saudi Arabia. So we sell missiles for a lot of money all over the world. But we don't want North Korea to be able to sell missiles, okay? So we have organized a lot of people to say that they're bad for selling their missiles, okay? And so that's our high ground, is that yes, we can sell missiles, but no, North Korea, you can't sell missiles. And they come back to us and they say, hold on, we can sell missiles, why not? That's what we got, right? And we say, no, the UN says you can't, but who controls the UN? USA, I point to me. We do, the USA, sort of controls the UN. Less right this second, I mean, this comes and goes. We're not loved at the moment, and so it's harder to get the votes, but not, I think on this one, most people don't want proliferation of high-tech weapons generally. So we can get this kind of vote pretty easily. Anyway, so they can build the easier missiles. The Soviets gave them the short-range missiles. Lots of people in the world have short-range missiles, like tons of people, like hundreds. Medium range is much harder, and they're getting good at that, right? And this is why there's bigger threats to Japan, right? They're getting more reliability, but I would argue most people can live with this, don't really care like we care, and I'm going to explain that. They're building longer range ones because those would be of great value. They stink at it still. They do lots of missile tests, and they're all kind of crappy because this is what they say. Building a nuke is easy, but rocket science is really hard, right? And that's true. It's really hard to build good rockets. And the longest one is an ICBM, right? An intercontinental ballistic missile. And that's the kind that could go around the globe and hit the USA, right? They ain't close. But they have tested bad ones. And failed tests do teach you a lot. Now, could they launch one sometime soon? Maybe yes. Would it fall apart like as it hit the target? Almost definitely. Probably for decades. This is hard work. They could do it, but they haven't shown that they really could do this at all. So most people think it's too embarrassing to really try because it hurts their product if they have too many failed missile tests. So they've quit doing big long-range tests a bunch. But they're doing these intermediate range ones, totally different from ICBMs, okay? Much easier to do these medium and short range. They go slower, they don't go in the outer atmosphere. They go half the speed, and so when they re-enter the atmosphere, they don't burn up as easily. The long-range ones really burn up and have a very hard time surviving, right? So much harder to build the long-range ones, okay? And so they've done some very critical tests on the long range, but they were actually pretty embarrassing, so they've pretty much bagged it, according to most people. But, you know, we don't know. They are a very close society. They could be doing it secretly somewhere and spring it on us. And we built ICBMs in the early 50s. This is old technology. They should be able to do this if they had, and we have much better computers now, much better materials. Things are available on the open market, but not good stuff. And we're careful with it. So most people think they're still a ways away, but they could spring it on us. They have not, so to be clear, in 1998, when a lot of this started with the Rumsfeld report, they did a big test of a long-range missile called the Taepodong. And it made a huge splash. I mean, the world said, oh, look, they are building a long-range thing. And they predicted in 98 that they'd have one by 2015. And most experts say they're further away today than they were then. Isn't that weird? Yeah, it's because things have been disrupted and things haven't gone great. And so a lot of people say they've sort of given up. They had a program then, and it's not even listed in the lists, even by, these lists come from the Missile Defense Advocacy Committee, okay? Ha, those are the guys who want them to be building these missiles. So if they were building them and we had any intel, they'd list them, okay? Because why are they building, we have huge portions of our government who are cheering them on and want this threat. And this is where this threat comes from, in my opinion. This is what I research, is our Missile Defense Agency needs a missile threat in order to build missile defense. And North Korea is the poster child, meaning their big advertising project. North Korea's building missiles. We need missile defense. Everybody else who it maybe could work has quit, doesn't do this anymore, okay? And so this whole thing, in my opinion, and I think I can prove it, and other people roughly would agree, has come out of our need to justify missile defense. Because we hold the power and we could solve this thing and have had the opportunity many times to solve this thing, but we don't really want to solve this thing. Because if we do, there's no reason to build missile defense. And that would be not in our interest because we actually want to build it, as China says, against China. But it's no good against China and only provokes them if we actually build it against China or against Russia. but not currently because Trump likes Russia, but historically against Russia. But that's silly because they have way too many missiles. So we can't justify it against them until it's really good. So we have to justify it against some little state, but no little states are building it, except North Korea. So we need them to build it. Poke, poke, poke. You're naughty, North Korea. Don't build those. Oh, good, they're building. That's how it works. Okay, so, and I can show this to you. All right, this is also from some missile defense advocates, and I love how they start the timeline in 1997, to not have no tests all the way back to 1994, when diplomacy started. So I want you to see this blank period here, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, one missile test, one long-range one, and then none. And then we gave up on diplomacy under George Bush. And now we've had missile tests, and they went nuclear, and now we're having more missile tests, and a ton more since Trump started talking smack last year. Just so you know. If you poke them and prod them, they'll test, okay? So they say they started it. I would argue we could show we started it. We have all the power to stop it because we've turned it on and off historically. Very interesting. All right. So, North Korea, Trump says he's going to solve this thing, right? I was trying to come up with all the Trump quotes. We're trying to figure out how's he going to solve it. What does he want to solve? He hasn't even said. He says they can't go nuclear and put it on a missile. That's the most specific statement I've found. But otherwise, he's just going to solve the problem, right? And he's said they're bad and things like that. But he doesn't state what he would like to solve or any policy about which he'd solve, right? He says all options are on the table. What does that mean? Most people, and I have to say, Hillary Clinton said this too, right? Said it mostly about Iran, but this is a quote of how we talk tough and how we make vague threats. But it's when we say it and how it was intended with Iran and how it's intended with North Korea is a veiled nuclear threat. That's what all options are. It's all military options, including perhaps nuking you, which is very provocative and wrong. But what's very interesting is it looks like, to most people, that the option of diplomacy is not on the table. All the other options might be, but then, so that's how it looked when Trump was on the campaign trail, and until a few weeks ago, when he got the memo, and Tuong pointed this out too, he started talking about coming up with other ways to solve this than military. I do believe that Trump thought he held all the military cards, and that he could make military threats and do something. And I think he's starting to get the message that there are no good military options. This was not clear to him from everything he was saying early on. And now, and interestingly, the Pacific Command started tweeting. Did anybody see that? They said, we don't want regime change. That would be silly. We want stability. And then Tillerson echoed it after the Pacific Command said, we don't want regime change. We want stability. I thought that was very interesting. So I was trying to collect all their quotes, and it turns out The Atlantic collected a ton of their quotes because people are guessing at what their policy is right now because they've been so all over the map. But the military keeps coming out saying, we've got no military options. None. Why? We are the strongest power in the world, right? We've invaded Iraq. We've invaded Afghanistan. But where does Al-Qaeda live, I like to tell my students? In Pakistan. Why don't we go there? They got nukes. Guess what happened to North Korea? They got nukes once we said. So the quotes that George Bush said in 2003 repeatedly was, we got to take them out. We're going to take them out. We're going to take them out. And then when we got bogged down in Iraq, he quit saying that when they went nuclear. But he said, we're going to take them out. He said the axis of evil speech, and then he said it over and over. So anyway, you provoke people, they build up. They look for a way out. So these are dangerous things to say all options are on the table, because if they think we're coming for them, that's when most people would argue you got trouble. Now, we recently, I just want to point this out, deployed this alleged missile defense to South Korea. THAAD. How many people have heard of THAAD? Oh, good. All right. It's finally in the news. I have been in the news, but most people weren't noticing. How many people think it works? I saw, yeah.
Today, right? Or yesterday? They said it worked.
Yeah. In a test, right? In good weather that we launched and probably had homing devices on it. Okay? Just to be clear, it worked in a test. All the tests that have happened so far, later we found out, had beepers on them. Beep, 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 beep. Is North Korea going to launch in good weather with a beeper on it? They say they're realistic tests. Nobody thinks they're realistic tests. It will work on intermediate range missiles some of the time. It's not impossible, as long as they stay in the atmosphere, okay? Intermediate range missiles can stay in the atmosphere or can go out of the atmosphere. Why missile defense will never work in the outer atmosphere is that decoys that look just like your missile or a warhead are cheap. They're mylar balloons from the grocery store. And you put a bunch of them up there and you can never discriminate, okay? So long-range missile defense against ICBMs won't work, according to any scientists not on the payroll, okay? And I'm not joking. You ask, they've done surveys of this. That's why we got an ABM treaty in the 70s under Kissinger, was because the Soviets and the US agreed it would never work. You don't get that treaty unless they both agree it won't work. Got it? So that's a no-brainer. But these intermediate range missiles are, missile defense is hoping to create systems that could work upon re-entry if the trajectory is low, like an intermediate range missile, so even it goes out for a little bit, or on all shorter range ones. So when we claimed it worked, what did North Korea do? They launched a missile test with 4 missiles at the same time. Did people see that footage? What do you think that message was? Oh yeah, well, overwhelm it, because we have 46 interceptors. All they have to do is launch 47 missiles, 100 missiles, 400 missiles. They've got lots of these missiles. Missiles are cheap. Missile defense is very expensive. That's the other reason we got a treaty. So, but what you see, if you look at who's putting the news feed out there, missile defense works. Missile defense works. And if you have to know these guys to know who's on the payroll and who's not on the payroll. The article I got a bunch of these from was from a Washington Post article, this thing, interestingly, full of missile defense promoters, lobbyists for missile defense, posing as pundits, okay? And you just have to know who it is. And I can go down the list with you if you would like to know some names. But I've been watching them for years. Missile defense promoters will tell you it works. People who study it and aren't on the payroll know it doesn't work. But that's what you're not seeing in the press. But this article from the Washington Post from 2 weeks ago was fabulously exciting because and it said it worked, and it really worked, and da-da-da-da-da, and I thought that was very interesting, and I can give you the site if you're interested. Anyway, missile defense, we just deployed this to South Korea. I love the fact, I didn't know if you noticed, the South Koreans protested it and didn't want it. I love that. They know stuff we don't know, I mean, as American citizens. Why do they not want it? Because it provokes China. They'd rather get along with China. China doesn't want missile defense. China can easily defeat missile defense, but they have to build up to do so, and they'd rather do something else with their money and not have increased tensions. So they've constantly told us, don't put missile defense there. We could solve this thing if you don't put missile defense there. We just go ahead and put it there anyhow, and it's not going to work, and it doesn't defend South Korea, and most people in South Korea know it. Usually when we deploy missile defense, we have to give the money, and I bet we'll find this out, that we gave South Korea like $10 billion in aid on the side. We pay them off to take our missile defense, and that's what we've done in NATO. We've paid the places that have Aegis ashore, if you pay any attention. We give them huge aid packages on the side to get them to accept our missile defense. Because it makes them a target, and it doesn't work, and they know that. So anyway, I have to tell you that it's the heart of the problem here, and that's all I wanted to get across. So that just remember, all options, military options, we don't have any good ones because they've got nuclear weapons. No fight is worth a nuclear fight, and once they got nukes, they're safe, and they know it, and that's why they go ahead and test like this, because we would be stupid to attack them in any way. And they're holding Seoul hostage, right? They have so much stuff targeted, and that's why I gave you that first picture, was to show you this. Here's the line, here's the heart of, or main, the capital of South Korea, and they have so much stuff targeted there that instantly millions of people would be dead if we attacked them, like in a preemptive thing, if they wanted to. It doesn't mean it will necessarily happen. It would be stupid for them to do it, but if they were desperate, they would definitely do it, and they're poised to do it, okay? So that's their strategy, is perhaps nuking us with a stray nuke in Manhattan, hidden, not delivering it on a missile, but in a marijuana bale, okay? Easy to smuggle. Not easy to deliver by missile, but marijuana bales seem to come in everywhere, and that's not hard. Just put it in kitty litter. We'll never find it. Lots of kitty litter coming from China in big trucks, and you just smuggle it in, blow it up. So we have no good military options because they've got nukes. They can smuggle them. We claim we're worried about their missiles, and that's silly. We can buy them off. So people say, well, we can't have diplomacy. And I argue no real disagreement here that we can't solve. There's no real land disputes. I don't agree that they want unification or the South want. They both want to be separate for regime stability first. They would like unification if it were peaceful and gentle and all that stuff, but no goal, in my opinion, for unification that would halfway threaten their regime stability. I'd put regime stability at the top as far as I can tell. Anyway, they have no ethnic or religious dispute. They're not going to fight over things. That's why this is so stable. And so I just will briefly point to the agreed framework. The agreed framework was a political solution that was in place, and it held even though both sides were suspicious, and neither side upheld their side, and it still held way beyond when it should have held. And I'll just show you a tiny little bit. I wanted to mention all these things, and I know that's too small, but what we did in the agreed framework was simply give them fuel oil, a little bit of aid, and the promise of building them light water, proliferation proof, or better than nuclear power plants. So they'd have fuel in exchange for not going nuclear. At that time, this was before they went nuclear, and they were willing for a little bit more money to give up their missile pursuits, right? Because they were only doing it to sell them, okay? So they had a whole bunch of things. Both sides were suspicious, and we didn't deliver the money or the stuff for years, and they still, as I showed you, didn't test for years. Finally, when we weren't delivering the money, and they started to raise tensions. They did that critical missile test that the Missile Defense Agency loved to get attention, as most people would say, and they got it. And Clinton kicked it in and worked really hard at the end of his administration to get it going. And most interesting is, Madeleine Albright went to Korea, and they said, it's all set. We're really going to do this. And then there was the whole Al Gore nonsense, and so Clinton was going to go to Korea if Al Gore won, and then he didn't. And so then he felt like he had to stay in the U.S. to keep stability, so it all got set aside. But very interestingly, if you'll remember, George W. Bush came into office in 2000, and he put Colin Powell as his Secretary of State, right? Colin Powell he knew George Bush had Rumsfeld and Cheney in his cabinet and loved missile defense. So Colin Powell, who actually wanted stability, I would argue, really wanted to denuclearize and do a number of interesting things, came into office and on his own, before he was given the memo, he went out and made a major speech saying, well, one of the main things I'm going to fix is the Clintons left really positive things on the table, and we can solve this North Korea thing, and we're going to solve it this year. And he made really bold agenda, like January 28th or something, really early. And Bush came out the next day and said, no, we got to study it, and ranked it and says, that's not our policy, and pulled it off the table, said we studied it, claimed they were cheating, and Powell was really, really, really upset and kept fighting them, but then ended up trying to fight over the Iraq war, da-da-da. And so then Condoleezza Rice comes in, right, and George Bush's second administration. And guess what she did? She immediately went out and said, we could solve this thing. This is the most solvable thing. I want this to be my claim to fame, is I'm going to solve the Korea crisis. And she really worked hard at it. And the missile defense lobby undermined her every step. But now, as this heats up, she's doing a book tour saying we could solve this thing. Has anybody noticed the Condoleezza book tour? It's a huge part of her book tour, is that we could solve it. Every piece is in place. Diplomacy worked once, it could work again. All sides know what it is. It's about money, and we can fix this thing. And the money's cheap. It's cheaper than building missile defense by a lot. At that point, it was less than $1 billion a year, and we were paying $10 billion a year for missile defense that doesn't work. Okay, so there used to be all these cartoons of let's just drop money on them instead of build missile defense. So anyway, there you go. So that's, I would just, many people realize that it could work. Politics is in the way right now. Trump hasn't gotten the memo on this. I think he might get the memo. Kim Jong Un is very young. He hasn't gotten the memo. He's very insecure. So accidents could happen. Everybody I know is extremely nervous, is not feeling as secure, but they think it's only that way because people don't get it. We don't teach about deterrence enough and that nukes work. And Kim Jong Un, you're secure. He knows that, actually. He does. I feel like he acts that way every chance he gets. But he's insecure enough that he'll act up to not reveal weaknesses and things like that. But, and his people are very misled. They think they're going to be invaded. They don't fully get deterrence and that they have nukes and that they're secure. So that's an unfortunate thing. But Trump is just odd. Tillerson every other day says, so this is one positive thing. Tillerson has said recently, but took it back, but has said it, so he might, that we'll talk directly to North Korea. And that's what they took away over time, was we won't talk with them until they give us, and he said without precondition. And we always said they had to give up their missiles first for no money, and then we'd talk to them again. And until they did that for no money and with nothing in the bargain, then we won't talk to them because they're outlaws. They're acting up, and anything short of that is extortion. So anyway, he might decide to talk. Okay, there you go. That's enough.
So hi again, my name is HYUNOOK. I'm from Korea. I'm an international student, and thank you for sharing your time to come to this event. And today, okay. So today I will present about how nonviolence influenced on Korea. So I'm going to talk about the nonviolence and explain about the recent incident that is happening in Korea. So these are stuff that I will present on my presentation today. So first, I will explain about the nonviolence, and then I'll explain about the incident that is happening in Korea, and how nonviolence influenced on Korean citizens, and then the result and the future that I think about what will be Korea like and democracy of Korea will be like. So you can listen to home. And this is another video that during the protest with no sound, but people are gathered in one place and doing some. So those are candlelights. They're using their phones. Yeah. And like.
This is in Seoul?
Yeah, in Seoul. And this is not. And the protests are not only in the Seoul. It's like all over big cities in Korea. So like literally like over 1.7 million people. So it's pretty a lot. Yeah.
So what's the date of this again? When did this happen?
Last year, October, from October to this year, March. So it's pretty recent. And those people gathered as one to to demonstrate the impeachment of the Korean president. So it is pretty amazing. Okay, so oops. So what is nonviolence? I read a book from which is about the nonviolence, and it was really interesting to read. So I want to bring some information from the book. So nonviolence is always near on us, but it can't be seen. But it has a power to change the world. So, and it can be adopted from national revolutions to personal interactions, which means that it can be personal by face to face, but also be societal, like country to country. Also, we need to know that the nonviolence can be misused. For example, when we use the nonviolence strategy, it can take a very long time to get a positive result that we want. But sometimes people can think that if nonviolence, while nonviolence are not working, they think that they can use the violence instead of the nonviolence strategy. So it can be misused in that case. And also, the nonviolence can be carried without any charismatic leader. It can be happen us from here or any person from here. So the most important thing is that the communication is really important thing to do the nonviolence strategies. And this is the really interesting example from Korea, which has happened from 2016 to this year, March. So there are lots of incidents happened in 1 year related to the president of Korea. She was the president of Korea. His name was Park Geun-hye, and there were lots of corruptions and illegal lobbying incidents that happened. But I want to focus on one thing that was really weird. So to clarify the incidents, in 2016, there was a K Sports Foundation and Mir Sports Foundation, but interestingly, they get a lot of money from different companies, and they forced the other companies to invest their funds to the company that she had. So her name was Choi Sun-sil, and they met when the President Park's father was alive. Her father was also the president of Korea, in 1980s. So they met when her father was alive, and one weird thing was that the President Park support the Choi Sun-sil's company a lot, and they ask other Korean companies to give money to Choi Sun-sil's company. And another thing is that the Choi's daughter, her name was Jong Il. She graduated high school, even she never went to any class. So there's unbelievable. But the Korea education law also, students in Korea also have to participate. There's a minimum attendance days. They have to show up to the school, but she never showed up, and she graduated. And she also entered to one of the best universities in Korea as horse riding player. And interestingly, after that year, that the horse riding special admission was gone after she admitted to the university. So citizens of Korea were pretty upset about these facts, and they started to protest to demonstrate the impeachment of President Park as doing corruption out of corruption and not doing the president duties. So first, and also, there was another incident happened. One of the Korean public broadcasting service called JTBC, they found the Choi Soon-sil's personal tablet PC, like the Galaxy Tab or like iPad, and then they find that the Korean president's speech script in the tablet, and this was a pretty big deal because no one can share or see the president records. This is the law, so Korean people started to suspicious about their president at that moment. So in November, started with October 2016, people gathered to do the protest, and in November, almost 1 million people, as we as you saw in the picture, 1 million people were gathered. And as a result, in December 9th, the Korean Congress voted for impeachment of the President Park, and they approved it by 256 out of 350 people approved the impeachment. And these are four like important factors that people are gathered in one place. So people in Korea actively use the social media to share their photos, share their videos and information and a lot of news. They use like Facebook, Instagram, or like Kakao, which is like similar to like a Snapchat in the US. And also they use hashtag to show their photo, like, oh, I went to the protest, I participated in this protest, and they used, this is the photo of the app, and they use this for sharing the location and time to let people know about the time and location of the next protest, so more people can get the information and show up to the protest. And also, they use some parody about the President Park and Choi Soon-sil to make people to have more interest about those facts, those incidents that has happened during the 2016. So in March 2017, like 3 months ago, the Supreme Court of Korea finally decided to impeach the President Park, and it was like, so 8 out of the justices approved the impeachment of President Park, and she went to the jail after the impeachment as commit a lot of corruption, business corruption, and also not keeping her duty as a president. And finally, the Moon Jae-in recently, like 3 weeks ago, he is elected as the 18th president of Korea, and he's really famous as doing a lot of communication with the citizens. So lots of Korean people are expecting on like developing the democracy and communication with the government between the citizen. And some people think the situation can get worse because anyway, we impeached our president is pretty rare case. But I'm pretty confident that we experienced that the nonviolence power worked to achieve our goal. And next step, I believe the next step it will be to educate ourselves and ourselves to learn about the nonviolence power and nonviolence strategy, to use those power to develop democracy and keep communicating with each other to make the better country, and keep trying to communicate with the person to person and the government also. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and please ask any. Thank you. Yeah. And like I mentioned before, like there are like a lot of incidents was happened in Korea, but I don't have much time, so I just like shorten the amount. Like, so if you have any question about the nonviolence or like the incident that which were happened in Korea, so then please ask me about to my mail or like my number. So thank you.
And then could you put the address of the song on the whiteboard, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Listen to it at home. So, I think we could entertain a few questions for any of the panelists.
It's pretty long. So.
Let me ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah.
South Korea was violent in many ways. As you probably know, in 1980, some people say 200 or up to 2,000 Koreans were simply massacred for the Korean army in May 1980. I left South Korea in the middle of the Gwangju massacre, more specifically 1980, May 23rd. But now, my question is, what has transpired, or what has transformed the usually violent Korean society into a non-violent Korean society? So explain why instead of what in the past 30-year transformative history of South Korea. That's the important question for us to know.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this question. It's a really good question. So I believe that the development of social media was really worked well, because usually, as I remember, in 1980s and 1990s, the President Park Jong Il, and after like Chun Doo-hwan, they focused on, they're using their power as similar to the dictator. Like they are politically acting like a dictator, but they develop a lot of advancement in economy. So at that time, the government usually hide the truth a lot. They control over the public services, or the information, or the news media. They control the media. But for now, as social media developed, people can easily share the truth more easily than the past, because even if the government controls the media, still a lot of information can be found in the social media. So I think social media is pretty critical role, right, when people in Korea to change their strategy from violence to nonviolence. And also, I want to say the participation of the young generation is also pretty important, because like in 1980s, during the protest, there was a lot of violence happened, as between the police and between the citizens. But like in last year's protest, one thing was different, that even if someone tried to hit the police or when police is trying to attack the citizens are shouted not to hit anybody and let's be peaceful all the time during the protest. So I think that is one of the biggest difference between like past protests and this last year's protest.
Well, I can speak a little bit to that. My name is Dr. Charlotte Peterson, and I spent the last 40 years traveling the world and studying parenting practices in the nonviolent cultures especially. And I wrote a book that came out last year in this country, The Mindful Parent Strategies from Peaceful Cultures, about how to raise children to be nonviolent. And Ulysses Press in Seoul bought the rights to my book and translated the book into Korean. And I was supposed to be in Korea right now for the promotion of the book. But after the THAAD missiles went into Korea, they emailed me and said that because of the political problem going on between our countries right now, that they didn't think it was a good time to release a book by an American about nonviolence. So, yeah. I think they have an attempt. They want to move that direction, but the world is maybe keeping, and our country is keeping that from happening. So,
I read in the Guardian Weekly that the North has the ability to put a chemical weapon on a missile. And I thought to myself, well, maybe the payload for a chemical weapon would be lighter than for a nuclear weapon. Anybody have any information?
Yeah, no. Chemicals would be way heavier if they were going to kill lots of people. You'd get a lot more people dead with a nuclear weapon. Chemicals take tons of stuff to kill tens of thousands of people. You could kill with a hydrogen bomb technology. You could have a very small weapon that could kill millions of people, right? So there's no comparison. They could put it's low tech to put chemicals on the front of a missile, so they could, and missile defense would be it would break into a million pieces and still be lethal, but very, very, very minorly lethal. Hundreds would be dead, not thousands. So it's really, chemical threats are kind of silly. They're threats of asymmetric warfare, terror type thing, tens to hundreds, maybe thousands if you were really sophisticated. The US and the Soviets weaponized them where they could kill thousands to tens of thousands, not millions. Most people think they're not millions. It's a mass destruction. They're not even as good as many good conventional bombs.
take a question here.
Okay, so first I'd like to answer that question. That the United States weaponized like hydrogen bombs to like a backpack level that it was distributed to Navy SEALs during the peak of the Cold War. So if that's possible, like those Koreans could send a suicide team detonate that atomic bomb inside like the Seoul or something.
Now they can do atomic, but not hydrogen.
Yes, it is. But based on North Korean technology, I believe they can only make a dirty bomb. So it's not that destructive, but it's still highly radioactive. So that's my personal opinion on that one. So sorry for my apology for arriving late. So if my question was answered during your previous presentation, my apology. And so my question is during the demonstration during that after Pyeong was arrested between two support groups for anti-Park and pro-Park groups, some pro-Park supporters were yelling that democracy is dead in South Korea. So I'm wondering what's your opinion on that.
So you're talking about the people who don't want to impeach the President Park? I mean, that protest?
Yes, those guys are yelling at.
Okay, so there was also the other protest to not to impeach the President Park as she just have 1 year. She just has one more year, and there will be a serious a lot of confusion if we impeached our president. So, but those people are not that many, like comparing to like as we saw in the picture of the presentation, and as I saw a lot of videos, like they, well, as you did you read about the news that was the U.S. news, and they said the Korean, the people who doesn't want to impeach the Korean president, they are protesting like shamanism. Did you see the news, kind of that? So the U.S. news explained them as like people who believe the President Park as like they're looking like they're seemingly like worship the President Park. So I think that was like not very many people, but and also their actions during the protest was not quite democratic. So I think that's the difference between a lot of people's protest and the other people's protest.
Question here?
Yeah, I guess I have a question for the professors here. And you both kind of touched on it. If let's say that we take a more or less violent option and we try to, basically work with North Korea and we, increase, either maybe possibly increase trade, allow for them to, their lives of everyday North Koreans to get better. And some people say there's an article written, I think in New York Times or something, but it said it was titled, the North Korea is getting wealthier, and is that good for the regime? Because it might not. It might lead to a more, less worrying about, the world is coming down on us, and more looking inward and looking towards government. So, but in certain cases, another person wrote an article that said that, instead of the desired effect of, liberalizing the North Korean people and making it more better for regime change, it might do what we see in China now as a stronger, more lethal enemy that's potentially going to be threatening us at one point. So instead of weakening the government by making the people stronger, you're making the people stronger, you're making the government stronger, and therefore making a stronger enemy to fight in the future. So which one do you think is more relevant in that case?
Yeah, I think I talked about the dilemma of normalization. And so normalization could, I think in the long term, can produce a more peaceful North Korean regime, right? And empower the people of North Korea. But then, in the short to medium term, it's an open question. So the regime can, use the economic resources to strengthen itself and, threaten its neighbor and so on. So that's a dilemma now. So and there's no solution to that dilemma, I think. I mean, if you're willing to take the risk of normalization, and then let's hope for the best. But then it may not turn. It may turn. It may raise tension in the short to medium term.
I have a slightly different view. I agree that nobody knows what would happen, but I think they're deterred. They can't win a war against us. They could cause pain. They could hurt South Korea, but they can't win. They will be a smoking, radiating ruin in under 30 minutes if they do anything really lethal. So, and they know that. So we have almost nothing to risk. But I think you rebuilt them. And that's what the sunshine policy is. That's why I'm jumping up and down. We did the sunshine policy, which came along after the agreed framework, but was enhancing it. It never got fully implemented and it got abandoned, blah, blah, blah. But it was the idea that if we hug them and open them up, things will get better. And I think there's no risk to the West to do it. I think we should rebuild Mexico and rebuild North Korea. And I think we really, really would have a much better world. And when we did tsunami aid, we got more love in Indonesia and some other places. We had a whole bunch of Al-Qaeda starting. It got rid of the terrorist threats. It's unbelievable what foreign aid in a crisis can do. and it's done it in many other places. It doesn't always work at all, but it's very cheap relatively, and there's no risk when they can't win. You know, I don't care how strong North Korea gets. They are the size of Pennsylvania, and they have 25 million people, and it's chump change. We've deterred the Soviets, we've deterred China, and I don't see China as a threat either. So I think with the world nuclear weapons war is truly obsolete. It's really obsolete. So it's not just a dream, it's a fact. And they know it, the Chinese know it, we know it.
Another question?
The U.S., I'd like to ask Dr. Tuong Vu, the U.S. has attacked many countries since World War II, or invaded and fought many wars, including the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, and the Iraq War, in which millions of people were killed. And these wars weren't self-defense, of course. No Koreans ever attacked the United States, or no Vietnamese ever attacked the United States, or Iraqis. And so my question for, I'd love to hear your theory on why the U.S. continues to have these, continues to attack and invade other countries. Why did we attack Korea in the Korean War, for example?
Well, we have a lot of power, right? And so, and it may be really cheap for us to, you know, threaten North Korea, and so that's what we. And then we have, you know, global interests. I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in the position of the leaders, and not trying to. I'm trying to understand them, just like I was trying to understand the North Korean leaders. You know, like I'm just trying to do the same thing. It's like an intellectual exercise. So I'm trying to understand. So like they may define our interests, you know, in global terms, and they feel threatened when those, you know, there were forces that were against those interests, and they also, you know, we the leaders of our country, they have values that they want, you know, to influence other countries. They want other countries to adopt those values if they can. If they can make those countries change to adopt our values, you know, that's all the better for us, for the U.S. as a country. Whether that's right or wrong, you know, I'm not talking about that. I'm just trying to explain what they think, and that's my theory. And to answer the question.
You know, can I just jump in? I think I'm not sure whether your characterization of the U.S. involvement in the Korean War as an attack. The U.S. involvement in the Korean War was sanctioned by the United Nations. There was no unilateral action by the U.S. government. If the South Korea had been, how can I say, occupied by the North Korea, South Korea is a communist country right now. And actually the best export of the U.S. government to the rest of the world is South Korea, along with Japan and West Germany. And the South Korea is thriving, absolutely, politically and economically. And the South Korea should be the shining example of why the United States committed to democracy.
The United States fought the war to prevent the control of South Korea by North Korea.
Oh yeah, there is no question about it.
System. That's your power.
You know, actually, North Korea was supported by the Soviet Union and China.
I think I'm going to have one more question here. Are there any more from the back? I think we're going to have to wrap it up at the time. Okay. Here and then, yeah.
Doctor,
Sorry.
could you explain more about why you think China won't intervene if the United States have the war with North Korea? Because I'm from China, and obviously,
I'm not saying they wouldn't. I didn't say that.
okay, so could you like explain like China is not risky? Because we have a pretty constant opinion on both the internet and the official communist propaganda that the bottom line for China is their strategic buffer between the China and somewhere which has the U.S. military basement, because we really afraid the invasion from the USA. So for example, if back to the 1950s when the Korean War happened, China really don't want to have a war with the USA. That's why China keeps saying if you cross a 38-degree parallel, we'll attack. And 40, and the end is Yangtze River.
Your question is based on as if I disagree with that. I don't. I didn't say that China, I agree. China wants a buffer. North Korea is protected by China. I never, what is the question? I agree.
Okay.
I think it's very stable.
So I think I just misunderstanding.
Okay, yeah. No, I just didn't understand my question because I agree that China does not want us to invade North Korea, and so they're protected, and we're protecting South Korea, and that's why it makes it stable. The great powers have agreement, but I don't think either side wants unification by one side or the other. So I think it's very stable until something weird happens, and that could be a very long time. I can't picture anything happening by either side. I totally agree.
And I was internally adding to the anxiety about the missile testing from North Korea. So coming here tonight was very illuminating to me and calming, actually. And I'm wondering, what media would you recommend reading?
So, okay, so I would let you, I have a very hard time with the news coverage, but there is a small cadre of people who follow missile defense. And so one of them is a guy named Jeffrey Lewis on Foreign Policy Magazine, okay? He's a wonk. Another guy that you can find on the internet is this guy, Ted Postal. He was from MIT. He's now at Stanford, retired, I think, but whatever. He puts out these little videos explaining what's going on with missile defense. There's another missile defense wonk named George Lewis. The group Union for Concerned Scientists has several dedicated physicists who work on this constantly. Elizabeth Grunland. So I'm just saying, there are others, but a lot of them now, under the Obama administration, Obama came into office, just to be clear, everybody thought he was going to get rid of missile defense. Even the Europeans did, okay? Because the Democratic Party was basically positioned to be against missile defense. And so it was a partisan thing, and you could find two sides to this, all right? And Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize for saying, I hope somebody remembers, in Prague, he said we should go to a world with zero nuclear weapons, right? And he only was bold enough to say that because the right wing was saying it too, out of Hoover Institute and this nuclear tipping point project led by Kissinger and George Shultz in honor of Ronald Reagan, we should go to zero. And it was all because of lessons from A.Q. Khan, okay? Because Khan, this guy from Pakistan, started selling nukes to Iran, Iraq, tried, but Iraq didn't trust him, thought it was a trap, Libya, Syria, and was trading designs to North Korea, and North Korea was selling missiles to all of those people. People felt threatened, okay? So anyway, so we were gonna go to zero under Obama, and then he gets into office and the industry gets to him. And the Europeans were stunned by this because they gave him the Nobel Peace Prize. And he created this thing called the European Phased and Adaptive Approach that said it had to be proven technology, which we thought were words within 5 years. It's not going to be proven, so you're going to abandon it. Instead, he bargained away. He said, you can go forward with missile defense if you give me the START treaty. He wanted to preserve START. So he made a bargain with the missile defense people and with some modernization people to keep START, because he took bipartisanship to get START, which was verification of reductions. And he said, as I leave office, he made it 7 years out, we'll start modernizing nukes and we'll start really building missile defense. And lo and behold, the last year of Obama, we started rapidly deploying missile defenses everywhere and modernizing all nukes. So we've launched a whole new $1 trillion nuclear modernization and missile defense under Obama in a bargain for START that he hoped he could reverse in 7 years and never could because he was stymied. And we're living it now, man. And missile defense is going all over Europe. And NATO has been trained under Obama to say very weird things, saying things like, missile defense enhances deterrence. No, it doesn't. Nobody believes that. Under certain careful considerations, it enhances deterrence. It undermines deterrence. It causes first strike. And so we're actually living in very dangerous times, and it's all industry driven, and it shocked me and others. But all the arms control community is coming alive saying, oh my God, look at this beast left to us in trade for start. So anyway, that's where we're at, and so you should feel calm that we don't really care about their missiles, but the industry's got us going, man. We're selling it everywhere. We're doing it all over Europe. It's called Aegis Ashore now. We actually made a bargain with the Navy. We're putting it on all our conventional boats. They were against it. The Pentagon was against missile defense. And then they made a bargain and said, well, we'll put it on your boats, and that justifies building more ships. So we now have Aegis on the boats, we have the Aegis ashore, and none of it works. Don't be fooled. It does not work, and it's very expensive. It's the most lucrative contract ever in the history of the world, and it's almost all research and no building except the stuff, but the components aren't even there. So just look at it.
Just can name three companies. Is it Raytheon?
Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and lots of companies have other contracts. But those are the two big leads. Raytheon is huge. They were the leaders, but Lockheed Martin is also huge. Yeah. But there's lots of little companies. I mean, they give a piece to everybody so that they all walk in step. Otherwise, they hurt each other, right? And so that's why the Navy is now for missile defense. The Pentagon used to be unified against it because it never would work. But it undermines deterrence and it starts arms races. And China's been saying this to us forever. Russia's been saying this to us forever. And it's all the same stuff we said during the Cold War. If you build missile defense, you can't do arms control because you can't build down if one person gets invulnerable. There's lots of stuff.
Is also Euro? BA, are they in it or is it just
John, I'm going to interrupt you. Try to circle it back. Beyond War tries to promote nonviolence, dialogue, diplomacy instead of ratcheting up to war. So last question here is, new South Korean President Moon has offered dialogue to North Korea. Is there anything we as citizens can do to push? Do you see any hope for the U.S.?
I do. I think we should study South Korea and see what they're doing. Because they actually know what's going on there, and they're trying to stop it. I mean, the people are. I totally agree with it. I came here to learn because I was so excited that they had protests against missile defense and that they know about it and they don't want to provoke China. I mean, they have a very stable, good thing. China doesn't want to be provoked. They've begged us not to do this, just to be clear. They don't want an arms race.
Well, diplomacy requires, cooperation. So, you have South Korea willing to talk, but then, it's still up to North Korea to, be willing to
North Korea is willing, in my opinion.
Paranoia, right? So, I mean, it may take time, and it may be successful. But there's also the chance that it may fail. As like the two previous presidents, Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, both tried to engage North Korea, but only achieved very limited results. So and created a backlash, which brought the more conservative, presidents into power. So it's it's kind of a game that requires both sides to cooperate, not just South Korea.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming. And any students that might be interested in participating next year and using this vehicle, this group, to further your interest in peace research or work or organizing, please sign up so we can keep it going next year. Okay? Thank you.